Well, looks like we are live, I believe. Yep, looks like we're live. Wonderful. Okay, great. Just wanted to check that. I'm going to hit record here in a minute once we get up on the hour, and I will then present fully this page. Just wanted to check that. Okay, it's right at 6 o'clock, so I'm going to wait another minute or two in case anybody, some folks want to join us. Looks like we got 2 people so far. I'm still getting used to how to use the chat portion of this while I'm going live, so feel free to post any messages in the chat. I'm going to be checking it from my phone, so hopefully that's going to work close to real time. I know there's a delay though on presenting here from YouTube, so we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to wait another minute or two, and then I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. So thanks everybody for joining. Looks like we got a couple people already kind of joining in. You guys can see my screen. If you can, just type something in the chat that says yes or no or a thumbs up if you can see the Canva screen, which it should be the dashboard, and it has doesn't have my presentation completely covering the screen, just part of it. So if you can see it, just give me a quick thumbs up. Yay. Thank y'all. Okay. All right. So let's want to go and get started. I'm going to record this because I want to see how that function works as well. So now I'm going to head over to here and start our presentation. Okay. Appreciate y'all for joining in. I know this is it's an evening and you guys are busy and you have things you're doing, but you felt like it wasn't important enough to show up to this to gather some good information. I'm just going to do a very, very quick intro for those of you that are on. My name is Alejandro. I am a professional artist. I've been an artist for about 12, 13 years. I started in 2011. I had a career in the military before that. So I'm definitely not one of those artists that's been doing it their entire life. I've only been doing it for 12, 13 years. But during that time period, I had a brick and mortar art gallery for 9 years. I also worked for the Small Business Administration as a certified business advisor for 4 years. I've done lots of content generation from, doing a YouTube channel prior to this one, a podcast, which we still have going on, as well as many social media platforms. So I have a lot of experience advising and running marketing for an art business, as well as doing all the other stuff in the business. But today we're talking about pricing, which is a really, really highly discussed topic, and it's constantly coming under some sort of evaluation, or people are having conversations about it because it's just confusing for a lot of artists, especially if it's your first time getting into business. So we're going to jump into this. Before I do, I just wanted to remind you guys, if you could subscribe to this new channel. I'm going to be doing all of our webinars here and saving them. Even ones that even videos that I'm just going to do an instruction of, and not necessarily a webinar. I'll be recording it here and posting it here. So if you want to get those up to date, this channel is primarily going to be about education around the art industry and helping out our local artists here in San Angelo. So please subscribe. And at the very end, if you can stay till the end, which is not very long, it's only like 12 slides. At the very end, I'm going to be providing a QR code to our Discord server, which I started from Reddit. If you guys are familiar with Reddit, there is a subreddit called Art Business, which is really good, by the way. If you're on Reddit, I would highly recommend going and check it out. And I started a Discord server, which is just to help other art business focused artists come together and just have more discourse around the topic of art business. So please stick around, and I'll make sure you guys get that QR code at the very end for the invitation, which is the invitation's limited in the time that you can use the link. Discord will end up deleting the link after a while. So I think you've got a few days to use it. Without further ado, let's get into things. This is what we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about why is pricing such a hot topic, which I think we need to discuss for a few minutes. Methods for pricing, marketing your prices, discounts, raising prices, sales tax, and a Q&A. Don't worry, we're going to spend enough time on each one. I hope you have some notes ready in order to take some good information with you. This is hopefully going to be recorded so that I can post it later and you can refer back to it whenever you need to. So there are some memes riddled throughout this presentation because I love memes, and they were created by Shelby, my wife, and she's a meme expert. So this is a good one. If you guys are familiar with Django Unchained, one of my favorite movies. So highly relatable when you first get that painting sold and the IRS comes to call it. So that's definitely not necessarily part of pricing, but it is part of the administrative duties of the business, which is collecting your responsibilities for your income tax. So that's a different slide deck. That's a different presentation. So let's get into why is pricing such a hot topic. So the reason why I wanted to kind of start with this is because there are a lot of different reasons why people struggle with pricing, and it's widely known that it's a difficult thing to deal with. And I wanted to talk about why that is. Pricing, in my experience, is really, really important because prior to where we are now, it wasn't really our responsibility to deal with pricing. I would say prior to the internet, pricing was really the responsibility of art dealers / art galleries. So that's the reason why I think that it's a hot topic, because now we have to deal with it on our own in most cases. Think about the ratio to gallery representation versus the amount of artists that are out there. There's only a small percentage of artists that are currently working that are represented by galleries. So you have to think all the other artists are having to deal with the pricing and all the business aspect on their own. And a lot of them are not prepared. They don't have all the information and education that they need in order to properly address it for themselves. So pricing is in the artist's hands now, and we have to kind of empower ourselves to become more educated on how to deal with it. The second is the wrong way of pricing can actually hurt. And I do have a short story about that I went through that. And I saw a couple artists go through that. In my experience, when I first started, I kind of knew how to price because I had a little bit of business knowledge, but I didn't know how it worked in the art industry. And I got invited through a friend, another artist, to show in a gallery in Houston, which was a great opportunity that early on. I realize now that's not normal for that to happen, by the way. It's not normal to get in a gallery like after 2 or 3 years of being an artist. It's not normal. But it happened, and I was already kind of selling work before then, and they wanted 2 pieces that I had in my inventory at that point. And one was 30 by 40, one was 36 by 48. So I shipped those over there. And within about a month, they both sold. But in San Angelo, I think I charged around that time period around $600 for a 30 by 40. And in Houston, it sold for $2,500. Even with the gallery cut, that's still a pretty good sale. I think they took 40% at that time, and it's still pretty good, but it wasn't normal. And I didn't know how to. I wasn't prepared for that really. Even though they advised me to increase my prices, by the time I sold that, I was already selling things at $600 in San Angelo, so I had to raise my prices up to 2,500 in order to match what they were selling for in the market. And the problem is that San Angelo is not Houston, and I raised my prices so quickly to so high that all my sales stopped. Like the minute people were calling and emailing and asking about, hey, you have a painting available, can you do a commission? And I told them my price, it was just too high at the point in my career in this area. And it's difficult to sell consistently when you go that high that quick. And the problem is that once I realized it, I realized I had to come back down. And that can be problematic if the person that originally purchased the artwork at 2,500 finds out that I reduced my prices. They are going to feel slighted. And that's a touchy subject in the art industry. It's not a written rule or anything like that, but it's sort of something that everybody follows. And can you challenge it? Yes, but it's you at great risk to yourself. And I've got some other stories that's happened to other artists as well. So that's why pricing is so important, that you get it right at the very beginning, so that you don't have to go through those, abrupt changes. Third, I think, is that pricing is so important, and why people talk about it is that it's not fun. It's not a fun thing to price your artwork, because then you have to sell. And I think a lot of artists think about, if I price my work, then I'll have to sell it, and that's very uncomfortable for me, and I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with the exchange of money. I don't want to deal with talking to somebody about buying it. I don't want to deal with any of that. And I think people just want more clarity. More artists want clarity on how to do it, how to handle that. And so it's kind of one of those things where I see it a lot with artists, and they're very uncomfortable with selling. And I totally understand that. It's not something that everybody's comfortable with. But you can get good at it so that you can at least feel safe doing it. And you might still feel a little uncomfortable, but at least you'll feel better about doing it itself. You'll feel more knowledgeable. Okay? So let's move on to the next. Let's talk about the methods for pricing. So what is my market's price sensitivity? We have to talk about the methods for pricing from this perspective, and I don't think many artists or art schools or anything like that even speak with this sort of language. This is business jargon. And why do we have to use that when we're talking about pricing with artwork? Well, because our artwork exists in a market. And just like in the example I just gave you with my experience, I didn't know anything about the market I was in, San Angelo, and I didn't know about the market I was going to, Houston. So we have to ask these questions in order for us to get to the pricing, which we need to establish. What is my market's price sensitivity? Your market is the area that you're in, that you're selling to. So it might be online, but it probably is mostly local if you're just starting out. If you've been an artist for a long time, then your market's probably a little bit larger than that. Might be the region, might be state, it might be national, whatever. Sensitivity has to do with how your market responds to different price levels. So let's talk about San Angelo as a perfect example, and Houston in contrast to that. So in San Angelo, if we were to go to, let's say, a restaurant, let's say it's just a normal restaurant, and we were to order a burger from there. If the burger was $35 here in San Angelo, do you think anybody here in town would buy it? Probably not, because our price sensitivity here is used to a $14 burger, right? But would somebody pay for it in Houston at a swanky restaurant, a $35 burger? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably possible in Houston. Here, I just don't see it happening. I don't see it being a normal thing. And that's an example of price sensitivity. So what is the sensitivity of the market to your artwork? And if you price it too high at the beginning, will they be sensitive to it? They probably would be sensitive to it. But if you priced it based on what other prices go for, a range, you would say, I wouldn't say like an exact price, but a range of prices that do well here in town, would they be sensitive to that? Probably less so if it matched the level of price sensitivity for this area. So using Houston as an example, you can see that the sensitivity to my pricing when I first started at $2,500 for 30 by 40 was a very high sensitivity. And I would love for everybody to be able to sell their work for a lot of money, but unfortunately here in town, that's just not realistic. And in a broader sense, you have to be careful about that in any place. I got lucky. That's just, I'm being very honest. I got lucky that I sold at that price point in Houston. It wasn't a normal thing. And then that gallery closed and that opportunity dried up very quickly for me. So, that just shows you that empowering yourself to run your own business is important because, you're not going to shut your own art business down if it's doing well, right? Or even if you're struggling, you're not going to shut it down. You're going to keep going. So the second thing is doing research. How do you come to the point of understanding price sensitivity in your market here in San Angelo? Well, the easy answer is that you go and you look at local artists' websites and look for the prices that they have on those particular artworks and take a look at maybe when they started, what medium are they in? Are they kind of in your niche? Are they doing a lot of, contemporary Western paintings? Are they framed? Are they doing it with acrylic or oil? Is it graphite? Or are they in your niche too, where like you're doing fan art, or you're doing abstracts? Take a look at their prices, see how long they've been selling. If they're kind of where you are, look up a few other prices somewhere else in galleries. Go visit, in person. Go to Raw. Go to a lot of these galleries and just see what are their prices at, and does it match where I'm at currently with my skill level and my my career. So far, I've only been in it for a year, 5 years, whatever the case is. That's a great way to determine sort of around where you might be more comfortable shooting for those prices. And that just gives you at least a starting point, because the problem is that not many people know where to begin. And doing your research in this way will help you figure out where to start. And that's a great place to begin. Just be careful that if you find an anomaly where somebody's like kind of where you are, but they priced it really high, if you don't see any other evidence of that, be very careful, because you might get into a position where now you can't lower your prices without hurting your career. So just food for thought. And of course, the last goal that we have here for our methods of pricing is finding your best price for now. The goal of pricing is to increase over time, based on your skill level as it increases, the demand of your art, which is an important thing to consider. And we want to choose the best price for you for right now. But just so you know, it should change later, until you get to a comfortable spot where you just don't want to increase prices anymore, because that can happen. Like, I don't necessarily believe the goal is to increase prices to get to a point where, you're selling for, $50,000, $100,000. That'd be great. But, I just don't think artwork realistically should sell for that amount. That's just my opinion. I think art should be accessible. So it's up to you how you want to control your prices. If you get to a point where you want it to keep going, great. If not, then you can stay where you are, based on how it's able to provide for you. Okay. Again, if you guys have questions, you can put it in the chat on YouTube, and I will look over in every few minutes to see if there's any questions. But we do have a Q&A at the end. So this is something you probably want to screenshot if you want. I'm going to be on it for a minute explaining this, but these are the most common ways for pricing your artwork. This is based on my own research. I've got several art books on business. Surprisingly, none of them mention this. So I actually had to scour the internet and find a lot of resources, but I had done research about this in the past, so I already kind of knew about this, but I wanted to confirm that this was still the case. And so as far as I can see, it is. Let's talk about the first one. The first one is actually the one I use for pricing my artwork, and I'll tell you why. So pricing per square inch is a method of pricing you guys might have heard about. The example I have here. So you take a normal size canvas, or, if you're working on paper or whatever the case is, you multiply the size of that in inches times a price per the square inch. So for this example, 16 by 20 times 75 cents will give me $240 as my price. I can then take that calculation and see how it measures up to similar sizes and prices for artists that are like me in the area or wherever area you are. Could be online, whatever. But I use that and be like, okay, this kind of is close. I'm comfortable with this. And then I also do one last check is I make sure that it's going to cover my expenses based on what I had spent to actually make that piece. Now, let me go back to why I chose this as my method. I chose it because I'm quick. I can do a painting within a week, and that to me is reasonable. But if you happen to take a lot longer, and maybe it takes you a month, 30 days to complete a piece, maybe price per square inch may not be your best way of going about doing it, of pricing. In that case, there's another way to do that. Okay, and you can price by time plus resources. So the example here is you take your hourly wage. I'll use mine as an example. So I charge $25 an hour. That's my time for my hourly wage currently. And I multiply that by, let's say, 8 hours it takes to complete a piece, because that's the method I want to use, plus my cost of materials for that particular project or that commission or whatever the case is. And I get to $245. So very similar to my price per square inch calculation, but this is actually based on my hourly wage and the amount of time I spent on that piece. These are the two most popular ways that artists actually do that. There's no wrong way to do it. It's whatever works best for you, but these are the methods. So if you want to screenshot it, go ahead and screenshot it. I'm also curious if you use a different method, put it in the chat. I would love to hear if you use a different method for calculating, but from what I could tell, these were the most popular, most common ways. Why is this important to be able to calculate the pricing? Why not just choose a price, right? Why not just choose one that feels right? Well, you could do that if you weren't operating an art business, I would say. If you're just a hobby artist and you just want to arbitrarily pick a price, honestly, I think as long as you're comfortable with that, you can do anything you want. But if you're doing an art business, if you're conducting an art business, then I think you have to think about consistency in your pricing. And people will ask you sometimes, hey, how do you price your artwork? People that are collectors, they want to buy. They might be a little curious about how you do that. And it's good. It's a good thing in business to be able to explain to your customers how you go about pricing things, because transparency is really important, especially in artwork. So that's why having a method is important. And I think, it's a good practice, because you can also calculate the increases. You can calculate your hourly wage up. Maybe you give yourself a promotion the first year, and you go up to $30 per hour. Same thing on the price per square inch. You could go up to 90 cents per square inch. We'll talk about increasing prices later, but that's an example of how you would do that with this. Okay. Awesome. Here's another meme for you. If you watch Friends, I think you'll get it. But it's really kind of hits home for me, because I think a lot about when people make suggestions for my artwork and what I should do to it. I think it's really funny. So that's for y'all. That's for some giggles. All right, let's talk about marketing your prices. So we've determined what the market sensitivity is. We've determined how you can go about finding a good price for you and how to calculate it based on the research that you've done. So we need to talk now about marketing your prices. This is something, again, that not many people talk about, but it's something you have to bake into your pricing strategy. Like how you go about thinking about pricing. This is part of it. And a lot of people don't even think about that. They're like, well, why would I have to market my prices? Well, there's a thing called the marketing mix, and you can look it up. It's called the 4 P's of the marketing mix. And it consists of promotion, placement, product, and price. We're not going to talk about the first 3. We're just going to talk about the last one, but they are all tied together. Okay. Your prices have to be part of your marketing, because that's how people get to know your artwork and how they can purchase it. If somebody likes your work and they have a place for it in their home, they can see it in their home. The next thing that they need to know is how much it costs. It's not free. They're going to want it. They're going to want to know how much it costs. So we have to let them know that, and that's important to consider in the marketing mix. So pricing is one of those things that we have to talk about. Why do they need to see your prices? So I have seen a lot of artists, over the last 10, 12 years, that don't show their prices online. And sometimes they're uncomfortable with doing it on social media, and I completely understand that. However, if you're thinking about your business and who's going to be buying and the fact that you're posting it for people to purchase, it doesn't look great when somebody's interested in buying your work and they go to your website, and they see that you have artwork for sale, but there's no prices and it says, message me. I see that sometimes. And I know the thinking behind that because I tried it myself, which was I want the opportunity to show people and talk to them about my artwork before they buy. Great. The problem is that when somebody sees that, they may not be able to message you right then and there. They may not have the time. Maybe they're just determining right now whether they want to buy. Maybe they got 10 minutes. They got their credit card linked up, like they're ready to go. And then you put that on there and suddenly they're kicked out of that momentum, their buying journey. And they may not come back to it. To be honest with you, they probably won't, unless you have like retargeting pixels on your website to be able to send them a reminder. If you have that, then you're probably good to go. But if you're not showing your prices, and you can't have that feature if you don't show your prices because there's no checkout, right? So you have to be able to show your prices somewhere where at least they can see how much it is and make it a determination. And maybe it says, hey, call me, text me if you're interested. You can purchase this. At that point, they probably would just take out their phone and just text you, say, I want to buy this. But you have to show your prices first. If not, they're going to assume either your work isn't for sale or they're just not going to be able to take action right then and there, and you want them to. So that's why people need to see your prices. And then you also have to know where to place them. Where are we putting these prices? Anywhere your artwork is, basically. Whether it's social media, your website, in real life, it doesn't matter. Wherever you put your work that is for sale is where you should put your prices. Just remember to make sure that you put plus tax on there, or you make it known that tax is going to be collected on these on your paintings, on your pieces. Okay. And if you don't know the local tax rate, it's 8.25%. I'm going to be doing another video because I think it's necessary for folks to understand how to actually go about applying for your sales tax ID and how to report your taxes quarterly. Well, I'm going to probably need to do that because I know there's a lot of artists that probably don't know how to do, because it's a little confusing. You get on the comptroller's website and it feels overwhelming. So I've done it a billion times. And I've done it for other folks a billion times. So we'll probably do a video on that. But make sure that you're putting tax on top of your artwork because you need to be collecting that for the state. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. I'm looking for questions. No questions. We're good. So let's talk about discounting your art. Should you do it? What are the pros and cons? What are the best practices? So this is a touchy subject because a lot of galleries will implement a discount, opportunity for collectors, but they only do it with your permission. And they only do it around specific times of the year, or around a specific event. So they don't do it a lot. Our galleries are not well known for doing discounts. Artists, however, it's totally up to you if you want to discount your work. But we're going to talk about the positives and the negatives of discounting your art. And should you do it? Should you not do it? Honestly, you should do it. But you should do it very carefully because it can hurt you if you don't. So what are the positives of discounting your art? For one, the positive is it can increase sales if you do it right. If you do it right, you can increase sales for a specific period of time where there's a lot of demand around buying art. You guys probably can think of it right now. Christmas time, Valentine's, maybe if your art fits around that. But, you start getting too specific with national sale holidays, then you start becoming like JCPenney, and that's a con. You don't want to be known like those department stores that are always having a sale for seemingly no reason whatsoever. And suddenly your artwork, it takes on a sort of vibe that it's more of a commodity and it's not really something that should be wanted because they love it. It can be, that point of view can be changed very easily if you're suddenly discounting your work all the time. Then people are like, what's wrong with it? Obviously, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that you have now created an image around your artwork that it's, it's either not in demand or, it's not worth, what you think it's worth. If that's going to be the case, then just lower your prices. You might as well take the hit on that rather than discounting your work. That's even worse if you do it on a regular basis. So what's another pro? A pro is that you can create buzz around your work. If it's done right, you can discount your work at a specific time for a specific period of time, and it can create buzz, especially if it's something that people have really wanted for a while, but something that goes away. A good example is like the Disney Vault. When they would do that with VHS tapes, they were releasing it out of the Disney Vault for a limited time, and it would create a lot of buzz, and people would want to snatch up, the copies. Maybe it's a limited edition for a very specific period of time at a discounted rate, and then it's going away for another 5 years or a year or whatever. So there's different ways you can do that to create buzz, but you have to think creatively. It can't just be like, oh, it's 15% off for the next 2 days. Like, trust me, I've done that before, and it doesn't work. It doesn't, people don't get interested in that. So you have to be very, very specific about how you go about doing that. And then the last thing on the con is that it can hurt your profits. If you're not really, calculating your discount well, your discount could eat into your profits. And then you're taking less money home and maybe even less money to be able to pay for your expenses. So we have a question from Scarlett. Appreciate the question, Scarlett. I have a question for whenever. How do you price for worth? I have a problem undercutting myself on custom orders because I struggle with worth of what I make. That's a great question. That's a very philosophical question. And I'm happy to discuss that because I've thought about and dealt with it many, many times. So there is that problem of, well, I just don't feel like my artwork is worth anything. And that's more of a question about how you feel about it rather than how other people feel about it. So my advice to you is to really dive deep into why it is that you feel like it's not worth what you think it might be worth, or what the market says it might be worth, like we talked about earlier. It's really important you dive into that and answer those questions for yourself, especially if you haven't launched your business yet. And if you have, that's okay. But, we have this curriculum called the 3-phase curriculum. And in phase 1, you don't sell your work. You just dive into your work, make it, you really get into why you're making it. And that really plays into the mentality around what you think it's worth. Because when you believe in your art and you enjoy making it, it's very easy to be able to say, okay, this is what the market, is, taking for this kind of artwork, or, for this size or whatever you find out about it. It's very easy to put a price on that because you're not so attached to your work. And when we're attached to our art, it suddenly takes on some of our insecurities and some of the things we think about in terms of the worth of it. And maybe we're just talking about like the worth in general, but that still leaves open this idea that maybe our art has, some sort of inherent value that we don't see and we don't want to acknowledge because it's difficult. And so I say all that to just go back to, this is an objective way of pricing your artwork. We talked about looking at the market, looking at research. Those are very objective determinations about pricing your art. And it gives you the opportunity to price your artwork objectively without feeling attached to those prices and whether or not it's worth what you're charging for it. And when you get into that kind of area, you talk about undercutting yourself in this example. That's exactly what happens whenever we don't objectively try to look at, what our artwork is doing, how the market is responding to it, is there demand for it? Those are all indicators about pricing, really. But when we talk about undercutting ourselves, if we don't do it objectively, the pricing, we do undercut ourselves, and then we don't get back what we need in order to keep things going, right? We end up undercharging, but then we don't get back expenses. We can't afford, to rent out our studio, or we can't afford certain things anymore, because it's now costing us, and we don't want that to happen. So I hope that answers your question, Scarlett. If not, please clarify. I'd be happy to continue answering it for you. So what are some best practices that we can do in order to help out with discounting our artwork? Some best practices, I'm gonna give you three because I don't want to take up your whole night here with jabbering on about best practices. But a good practice is to make sure it's very time bound. When we discount our work, we don't want to discount it and leave it open ended. We want to communicate to people if you're emailing or posting to social media, hey, I'm running a discount for the holidays. It's it's a Black Friday sale, and it's only going to go to Cyber Monday. But you would have to promote that heavily because there's discount emails going out everywhere. there are ads and posts for discounts at all places. So if you have a captive audience, like an email subscription list, probably the best one to send that out to. But that's one tip. Another one is to track the use of the discounts. That's really, really important. Not many people think about that. But when you're operating a business, whether it's in real life or you're selling it from a place, maybe your own studio, maybe it's not online, it doesn't matter. You need to track when people purchase something at a discount because it tells you a little bit about the person, and it tells you a little bit about what it is that you discounted and sold. I know that it's uncomfortable to think about artwork as a commodity or a product, but try to think of it separately. Don't think about it in terms of your creative process. Think of it after you've created the artwork is when you want to think about it as a product and how it performs around other people in other situations, especially with discounts. So keep track of those people that actually take advantage of the discount so that you can make sure that you collect that information and that data. It's going to be useful in the future, especially the next year when you're wanting to run discounts. You're going to be like, oh, how did last year go? What's sold? How much did I discount for? Should I increase my discount? Should I decrease it? Should I improve the time, the time that I allowed for the discount to go? So that's information you want to keep at hand. And then the last one is ask for something in return when you're giving a discount, because you're giving something to somebody. It's kind of like a gift. You say, hey, I'm doing you a little favor by giving you this 15, 25% off. Maybe you can give me your email if you don't already have it. That would probably be some really good information to have if you're going to do a discount. Ask for an email. So it asks for permission to send them emails on a newsletter you're collecting, or just an email, address book in general that you can just reach out to people that have collected and be like, send them a personal email. Say, hey, thanks for purchasing the discount, discounted artwork, have the specific work they bought, keep track of that, and say, hey, thanks for buying that landscape. I really appreciate that. I've got another landscape that I'm doing that's very similar that's coming out next month. I just wanted you to know about it. Let me know if you're interested in seeing more. That's how you create relationships, because then it's personalized. They're like, imagine if you get a personalized email from the CEO of Target and they're like, hey, thanks for buying that, purse last week. Really appreciate it. We got some new purses coming out soon, pay attention to it. I mean, God, if it was that personal, it would be crazy. Technology is kind of getting to that place, but you can do it without having to go through all those bells and whistles if you just collect their email and you just collect a little bit of information about the discount. We should be doing that for all artwork that sells, to be honest with you. That's the best way to run the art business, is keeping those kinds of records. So moving on, let's talk about raising your prices. This is something also that a lot of artists don't do. They rely on galleries to control the pricing because I think it's difficult. Like, for instance, what Scarlett mentioned earlier in the comment, in the question, I think this will tug on something very similar. If you're unsure about the way about pricing your work, raising your prices can be even more cumbersome. But there are some advantages to raising your prices. For one, it can control demand. It can provide benefits to your collectors. So let's talk about each one. So I raise my prices if there's demand still by at least 10 to 15%. And then on a year where I don't, it's 3.2%, I think, is the rate for inflation, the common rate for inflation. That's how much you should be at least raising your prices by. Is if there's no demand, meaning your sales really aren't, overwhelming. And by demand in terms of control is what I mean is the demand is you have people buying a lot of your work. And sometimes it gets to a point where people are buying your work, they're asking permissions, but you're overwhelmed. Like you're getting burnt out because there's so many orders coming through. The best way to control that is to raise your prices a little bit. It will keep the flow coming through, but it won't stop it, but it'll slow it down for you to keep up. and it'll compensate you for slowing down. That's what raising your prices will do if you have demand. If you have the kind of steady demand, probably just raise it by the rate of inflation, rather than try to raising it 10-15%, because that might slow things down even more if you have just normal demand going. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when we talk about controlling demand. Slowing things down. If it's crazy, you're selling like the nuts and you can't keep up, raise your prices a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit to slow things down. A little bit, maybe like 10%. That might slow things down just enough for you. I wouldn't recommend going the other direction, which is lowering your prices, unless there's a situation where you have no choice, like like the situation I was in Houston. Another benefit is it benefits your collectors. So, I've been doing this for 12, 13 years, and, I know one of my first collectors, and I know he's had the art appraised, and I know he looks at my prices, and my prices have gone up. They've doubled since 2015. Yeah, yeah. My prices have doubled since then. And that when he looks at that, he's like, "Oh, well, the value of the artwork that I got is at least going up, and going up. Not that he would ever sell it, but sometimes they do look at it that way, and they want to know that it's appreciating. They may not ever sell your artwork, but it's good to know that the value is going up. And for some people, that matters. It doesn't matter to me in terms of why I buy artwork, but everybody's a little different, and it can be a benefit when they see those prices going up. Some of the best practices for raising prices, like I mentioned before, is doing it 10-15%, at least the rate of inflation every year. Looks like we got a question from Marcy. I'll get back to the tips, I promise. Can you discuss selling an original and prints? Should the buyer of the original be informed that there are prints too? How to price prints? That's a great one, Marcy. I'm sorry I didn't expand on that a little bit more. But let's talk about prints real quick. So prints are obviously reproductions. They're in different qualities of prints, but essentially what you're doing is you're taking an original and you're doing a either open collection of prints, meaning you can just print as many as you want, or you're doing a limited edition controlled printing of maybe, let's say, the average is I think around 100 for limited edition prints. But in that case, how do you go about pricing, and do you inform the person that bought the original? I never inform the person that bought the original that I'm doing prints, because the person, first of all, I always put on there on my website that their prints are available, so it's kind of widely known. But at the same time, I retain the copyrights to those originals and the prints. If anything, there could be a disclaimer on the website that I think is probably a good idea that you have, is that you retain the copyrights and the reproduction rights, and that an original piece that's purchased by somebody else doesn't have those rights. Just because they purchased the original doesn't mean they bought the intellectual property to the artwork that you created. If somebody does that, then they're stealing from you, and you have to sue them, unfortunately, or at least send a cease and desist letter. And if you're going to be pricing your work, again, if you're going to be pricing the print and it's open, an open print, then you could price it accordingly. But typically with limited edition prints, you can price them a little higher, depending on their size and the quality. Again, it depends on if they're a G-clay canvas print, or if they are an archival print, flat archival print, and their size. And it also depends on where you get it done. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered there. I didn't want to include that in here because prints can really get complicated. Here's what I will say about prints. In order to do it right, if you go back to the way we were pricing on the pricing page, it has a lot more to do with the cost to print than your time to print them. Okay? The cost that you incur for printing it should be included in the pricing. So I'll give you an example. If it costs you, $10 to print it, okay, and if it's, local, great, you don't have to pay for shipping, then you should incorporate at least a percentage of profit so that you can make something back in addition to getting the cost that you paid for it. So you definitely can't charge lower than $10 for a print that costs you $10. You'd break even at that point. But a percentage of profit from the total cost, sometimes it's arbitrary. I've seen people go very high on that on the pricing for a print for the profit, but it's because maybe that it's more valuable and the quality is great, and like maybe you're doing extra things like certificate authenticity. Maybe you're embellishing it, you're signing each print. Like in that case, you can increase those prices a little bit because the value is there. You're showing the value. But most often than not, regular retail, profit margin is anywhere between 20 to 30% that you can mark up on something, that you are obviously having to produce and pay for. So that's how I go about pricing. I usually charge a little bit more, but I include more value in the prints themselves. So I sign them, I embellish them, I do all that stuff so that I can charge a little bit more for those prints. But I always have to include the prices, the cost of what it took to print them. I always have to include that. Okay. So hope that answers your question, Marcy, but I appreciate you asking that because it's a kind of a common thing is understanding prints. We can go more depth into that because I have a spreadsheet that I use for my prints in order to determine the prices. But that's for maybe another presentation. But I hope that answers your question in a nutshell. I know it wasn't long enough, but if you do have more questions, just feel free to message me. You can go to our website, artalliancesanangelo.com. I'll be happy to answer a little bit more questions for you. So why don't we move on to the next meme? The two moods of an artist. Yeah, I love Friends. Manic inspiration and creative red. I haven't seen these in a while, so I'm getting a kick out of them too. That's funny. All right. Well, let's talk about sales tax. This is one of the, last, slides that we have to go through. Marcy said, great, thanks. Appreciate you. So sales tax. We talked about it earlier. I'm just going to briefly touch on it and kind of clear up some confusion. Because some artists get confused about, well, what do I do? What do I do with it? How do I collect it? Who do I pay? First of all, sales tax is a state program for tax. It is collecting sales tax on products that need to remit that sales tax, meaning they need to collect it and give it to the state. So the state runs this program. It's not a federal program. Every state is responsible for collecting sales tax, except for there's 2 states in the United States that don't collect sales tax. I think it's Oregon and one other state, Washington. The Texas Comptroller is the one that runs that program. And they're the ones you will apply to for the sales tax ID, open an account, and pay them through that account. So the Texas Comptroller's website is the one you want to go to in order to set that up. What is collecting, saving, and remitting? Collecting is collecting the sales tax on the artwork you've sold. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have a $100 painting that you sell. You collect 8.25% tax on it, which is $8.25. The $8.25 is not your money. You're just collecting it for the state. The $100 is your money, up until income tax. But the $100 is your money, and the $8.25 is not. So you take that $8.25 when it comes into your bank account, and you move the $8.25 into a separate account, a savings account. That's the save part of this. You move it to a savings account named taxes. That's what you name it. And then you leave it there. At the end of the quarter, for that period, you will remit all of those taxes you saved in that account. And you do that every quarter. You remit it. So that's the comptroller will send you a notification. They say, hey, it's time to report your sales tax. You have until this date to report it. And if you don't report it, then you get a penalty, $50 penalty. So be aware of that. Now, net zero reporting means that even if you made 0 sales and you have a sales tax ID, and let's say you just took a break, you went on vacation, or maybe you had a slump or whatever, and no sales came through, you still have to report 0. You can't just be like, well, I didn't get anything, so I'm not going to report anything. You still got to go in there. You got to report zero. If you don't, you'll get a $50 fee, and those fees will just collect and collect and collect until the state will just take it out of your bank account forcefully, because they can do that. They can do that. So net zero reporting is the other thing I wanted to mention on sales tax, but just always make sure that you put sales tax on your artwork. If you're selling online through a website like Etsy, Etsy actually collects it for you. So some websites will do it for you. Others will make sure you do it. If you have your own website and you're doing it on your own, it depends. I have Big Cartel. I think Shopify might collect it for you, but Big Cartel is an e-commerce site for artists, and they collect the sales tax for me. So that means that if I make a sale through there, I don't have to report it. They do. They do. But if I collect a sale through, like, let's say somebody Venmos me money, I have to pay for that. I have to collect the sales tax for that. Okay. So I just wanted to clear that up. Okay. Well, believe it or not, that was quick. That was kind of in a nutshell what you needed to know. I promised you I was going to keep it short. This was really the very specific things you need to know about pricing. I wanted to include some resources here at the end. This is a book that I recently read that is incredible, especially for folks that are feeling a little, insecure about their artwork or how to price it. The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, highly recommend it. This, if you have Spotify Premium, the audiobook is on there for free. Well, because you're paying for it. Great book, but I have it on my bookshelf and I love it. Websites I would recommend, Artwork Archive, because they do a good job of providing free resources for artists, and they always send out or publish a grant application list for the year. So they scour the internet and they print this grant list that you can apply for specific grants for artists. So they're really well known for that. The Thriving Artist podcast by Preston Smith. He's a good friend of mine. He's a bit of a mentor as well. He's taught me a lot of things. Highly recommend his podcast. And then here's the Discord invite that I promised all of you. It is the Discord that I created about a month or two ago. We've got 51 members in the Discord, and it came from Reddit. So there are artists in there from all over the country. I think there's some that are even international, and they bring their knowledge with them. And you can ask questions, and they are really good about answering them. They're very supportive too. You can share your artwork and ask for advice, and they'll be very honest, but they'll be very nice. They're all cool people. So we hang out there and we ask questions and we do art challenges. So here's our invitation. I think it's good for a few days. You're welcome to join. If you're not on Discord, download the app, check it out, spend a few days in there looking around, asking questions. But yeah, that's a really cool Discord group that we got going there. So time for some questions. Should federal taxes be considered when pricing? Good question, Scarlett. Federal taxes, not necessarily. They don't really have an impact on how you price because you have to pay it regardless. So it's 15.3%. That's the self-employed tax rate for us as artists that are in business. That's how much the IRS is going to charge you at the end of the year for what you earned. And it's take home, not this is a tax on your on your net profit. Yeah, your net profit. Your gross profit is your everything included. So let me walk you through it really quick. I guarantee it's only take me 2 minutes for you to figure this out. What you make on an artwork, let's say you sell a $100 piece of artwork. Okay, we already know the 8.25% tax is on top of it. It's $108.25. $8.25 is for the state. The $100 is what you take. Out of that $100, you pay for expenses, right? We talked about, maybe $40, $45 out of expenses for the canvas, maybe some brushes, a paint tube, whatever. The $45 is your expenses for the business. So you subtract that. You subtract that from the $100, and now you have $55. Okay, that is your take home. That's your profit. Now, what you do with it is up to you. If you reinvest it back in the business, then it's not profit anymore. You have now another expense. You've purchased something with that money, and it's logged as an expense. Maybe it's a new easel. Okay, then more expenses. But whatever is take home, whatever you spend on bills, food, taking your kids out to eat, putting oil in your car, paying your phone bill, whatever, that's profit. And that $55 of profit is what the IRS is going to tax 15.3% tax on. And that is what you're going to have to pay the IRS at the end of the year based on all of that profit for all the entire time. So, should you account for that in your pricing? I mean, you can put 15.3% on top of whatever pricing you figured out for your market. I think that's totally fine. You can definitely do that. There's nothing against that, just as long as you know you should be collecting that 15.3% throughout the year and putting it into an account so that you can pay for it come tax time. So the answer is yes, you can. Do you have to? No. But I really never thought of it that way, to be honest with you. So I think it's a great question, but you can add 15% on top of the prices you figured out for yourself. And as long as you are collecting those taxes and giving them to the federal government at the end of the year, I think you'll be good to go. So great question. So yeah, if you guys have any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, this has been a really great first webinar. We had around 6 people show up, so that's great in my in my book. I think as long as we're getting the information out there, I'm going to save this, see if it recorded it. If so, I'm going to turn it into a podcast because it really wasn't that long, not as long as I thought. And we will schedule some more. If you guys are active in the Facebook group community, please go in there, provide some feedback, maybe even provide some suggestions of what you want to see next. We did a poll last month for what people needed in terms of information. So I might go down that list to do the next webinar. And we have a, Muse and Mingle at Donata coming up March 1st from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's really just to hang out with each other and, just kind of get back together. I wish I could hang out with artists more often, but it's only usually when there's a show going on. And and with that, it's people are just distracted looking at the artwork. But with this, it's a Muse and Mingle. We're just going to be hanging out. We're going to go to Donata. We're going to just talk about art. We're going to catch up. We're going to have some snacks, some drinks. If you want to bring some drinks or some snacks, great, do it. We would love to see you there. And that's March 1st. So if there aren't any questions, thank you, Marcy. Really appreciate you. Thanks for the questions, everybody. And I'm going to end it there, and we will see you on the next webinar whenever we host that. So appreciate y'all coming along, and have a great evening.